Welcome to the Dojo, the podcast where we turn marketing stories into marketing tasks that will help you achieve your marketing goals and increase your revenue. Get those juicy leads coming in, those nice quality ones. This week, we're going to hear two stories and we're going to turn the best one into those tasks you need to hit those goals. My name is Davies. I'm the head of marketing at Exposure Ninja, and I'm joined by Tim Cameron Kitchen, Exposure Ninja's founder, as well as Jess Percival, a superb digital marketing specialist who also works at Exposure Ninja. How are you both doing?
Pretty good. Sun is out.
Excellent. Well, if you're not familiar with how this goes, I'm going to ask these two wonderful people for their stories for this week, and then we'll pick one to turn into tasks for business owners to implement and tasks for marketing managers or marketing directors to implement as well. Jess, what's your headline for this week?
My headline for this week is what's going on in the world of Bing's search AI.
What is going on in their world? And Tim, your headline for this week?
Spot the theme. OpenAI finally reveals its SearchGPT product.
Okie dokie. Oh, that's a juicy one, that one. I'm going to go with the Bing one first. I'm curious to know what they're up to because I feel like I haven't heard from Bing for a short while. So I'd love to know what they're up to.
This is it. I feel like all the content out there and all the conversations are about like what's Google doing, what's, and then Bing kind of already did it and it's just kind of got on with it really. So I think that's like why I wanted to talk about it, because I think there's a lot to say and I think it could be quite interesting. So basically, to start, Jordi Ribas, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, CVP, Head of Engineering and Product for Copilot and Bing, had said, I'm excited to show an early look at Bing's new generative search experience. It combines the power of LLMs and SLMs with Bing's search results to generate a more delightful and efficient UX layout. This is another meaningful step forward in our evolution of AI-powered search. So basically what's happening is they're changing the look. Traditionally, the look was you type something in search, you get an AI-generated answer back, I believe. It's been a really long time since I looked at Bing AI. I think at one point it used to open it in a new window, the chat, but it wasn't really anything different to what we're seeing from Google now or other spaces, right? So I had a look, and actually I initially wrote, in my opinion, it is both delightful and efficient, but I have actually changed that opinion quite drastically since kind of initially being like, that looks okay. And then when I actually thought about it, I was like, no, I don't agree with that. So the way that it looks is that it's kind of in two halves. On the left-hand side, you have the generative AI result, you have the related items underneath it, and a bunch of kind of the AI bit. Then on the left-hand side, is that the left-hand side, or am I completely describing this wrong? On one side, it has the AI answer. On the other side, it has the organic search results. And then in fact, on the other side, it also has a little table of contents that you can scroll up and down and see what is in the generated response, because it's a lot longer. But the situation that kind of leads to is this page that is just full of text. There is so much happening. You don't know where to look. And it's really overwhelming. So I think initially I was like, wow, a shiny new thing. There's so much here and it's so different. There's so much happening. And then I was like, oh, wait, that's actually a bad thing. It's nice that they're using these videos, and they're adding in related stuff and all this, but it was just too much. It was just too much, I think. And yeah, I don't know if any of you have had a chance to have a look at this or kind of have heard about it, or if you have any thoughts. But I think as much as this is a conversation about AI, it's actually really a conversation about UX design and not overwhelming your audience. Because I think people are going to type things in and go, oh my God, I don't know where to look. If the AI answer is producing something totally different to what's on the other side. And it's just, I feel like it could get a little bit messy, really.
I feel like Bing has, as soon as Bing built ChatGPT into its search results with Bing Chat, the world, and by the world I mean the media and marketers, assumed, wow, okay, this is it. Finally, Bing is going to take some significant market share. And the Microsoft CEO Satya was talking about making Google dance and sort of finally putting some pressure on Google, and the fact that they didn't have to make loads of money because this wasn't a cool product for them. They could afford to experiment and test and try wild things in order to take some of that Google market share. Well, here we are, a year later, and from what I can see on StatCounter, Bing's market share has increased slightly, maybe from 3% to 3.72%, but I'm not sure that Google is dancing just yet. Google's Q2 earnings were higher from search than they've ever been before. It almost seems like what's going on Bing isn't really moving the needle for them at all. Like they've been testing all sorts of different UX stuff over the last year, with some of it with generative AI, some of it without. And here we are, still not really knowing what's going on with Bing. It just feels like they're poking around in the dark a bit.
How much of it do you think is that the message is not getting out from Bing and all its developments to people who are not using Bing? Like, I imagine ourselves, marketers, people who are kind of attuned to what's changing with AI, and it seems to be the buzzword, we're kind of aware of the changes that Bing are making. Do you think that Microsoft and Bing are doing an effective strategy of telling the world that there's this better version of search available, even if it, as Jess said, might be a little bit ropey when it comes to the UX side?
For me, I think they've fallen into this trap that I actually see a lot of businesses fall into as well, where they're like, we've done this brand new thing. This is so exciting and novel. Come over to us. You go over to them, and then the product wasn't great to start with. There was a lot of people breaking it and pushing it, and I think basically what's happened is that people came over for that novel phase and then weren't getting anything better than what they had potentially over on Google, so they didn't stay. Whereas I think if we would have had a bit more of a well-built AI situation over there, a better product, if we're just applying this to not just AI but any business, then people would have stayed. We've seen this with, for instance, oh my gosh, when these AI pins that people are doing, I think it was it the rabbit or the R1, and then there was another one, in that people are buying it and they're getting this first edition. It's not doing what they want, but the company's going, but the next one will, but by that time they've already spent a bunch of money on a thing that doesn't work, and they're probably going to go elsewhere next time unless they've really they're really in the cult of the brand, but I do feel like that's kind of what happened here, is that people's trust was ruined to start with, and so there's no incentive for them to really move over to Bing. And also because Google keeps saying, we're going to do that, just wait, we'll do it and it'll be better, and then it's not. So
I think you nailed it, Jess. Like, there's that concept of switching costs, isn't there? So if you're going to convince someone to switch from Google to Bing, and by the way, I know some in the industry like to complain about Google search results or the quality of search results, but overall, Google's pretty damn useful. It's pretty good. If you want someone to switch over to Bing, that experience can't just be incrementally better. 10% better doesn't switch your habits, doesn't switch your default search engine that's programmed into all of your browsers, doesn't stop you using Chrome, all of these things. That thing needs to be like 10 times better. And I just think it's really difficult to deliver a 10 times better web search service than Google. And that's fundamentally what Bing is still presenting here. It's still a web search. Yes, there's some bits of generative AI, but fundamentally it's a web search. I don't think any of us would argue that Google is better at ranking web content than Bing is. It's really frustrating experience if you're used to using Google to go over to Bing. And fundamentally, unless that thing is fixed, unless they find some transformational experience that they can build here, I think a few UI tweaks here and there just isn't going to cut it. And like you said, Jess, you only get one chance to make a first impression. If you tell your ex-partner that you've now changed, and then, on your first date, you do exactly the same thing that they've always hated, well, next time you go to them and say, I've now changed, well, it's actually harder to get them to come back over. So it's a really difficult challenge. And I'm not sure that Bing is relevant and will be relevant because of this sort of dynamic. It's a bold prediction to make, but I don't know.
This is why I think that Microsoft are quite keen to have their part ownership of Open AI, because I think back to like about 6-7 years ago when everyone was for a brief while more focused on privacy, and everyone was like, I'm not going to use Google anymore. I'm going to use what's it called, the safe one, DuckDuckGo. Everyone's going to use DuckDuckGo because it's safer. We're going to use any other of the other 5 different privacy options. And what do you know? Google says, we're going to add in some more privacy options and try and track you less and so on. They do the right thing from a PR perspective, and they protect themselves, protect their share of search, they protect their stock position a bit. And over time, people lose interest. They realize that these other systems or other options are not really as reliable as Google, so they all come back. I'm not saying that everybody does. A lot of people will be diehards, early movers, the sneezers, as I've been finding in Purple Cow. I finally got around to reading Purple Cow now. So many things to say about it. It's not for now. But yeah, these people are like coming back to Google, and it's the same here where Google is reacting to what everybody else is doing. We're going to do a Gen AI in the search as well. Protect our position. In a few years, people have forgotten all about it probably because our search experience will just be generally good. You won't be able to tell the difference between Gen AI or not, our regular search results. Whereas Bing are like, okay, we can add it in here, but we've got to protect ourselves because the likelihood that Bing is going to take off for some reason is not going to happen. Like, it's safer for us to invest in the company that will disrupt than for us to try and get that disruption within our own platform. And that's where like, here's all the money in cloud server storage space you could possibly need, because you've probably got a better chance of winning and disrupting than we have. So they can take some of the lessons from it, but their big business win here is not for Bing itself. It's that percentage ownership of OpenAI and SearchGPT, which is going to take us on to Tim's story. Any final thoughts on this one?
No, except that sucks for Microsoft because Bing has an ad-supported business model that makes money, whereas SearchGPT at the moment doesn't. And Sam Altman has said he's actually quite critical of the ad-supported search product, so sucks for them. It's their earnings call tonight at the time of recording this, so it'll be really interesting to see what people think about Microsoft's earnings. Should be an interesting day for those of us geeky enough to care.
Also, I do wonder whether everybody could be taking like a bit of a UX lesson from other rappers that are doing better. Like Perplexity, for me, I didn't really care about until I started to use its discovery kind of feature of like it pulls out a new story and then presents it for you. I have to say the UX of that is way better. If you took that and added like some ad element to it, it'd actually be really usable and a good place to go for news discovery, but not necessarily as a search engine. So if they could take some of the UX from there and put that into Bing, they probably have a much better time since they have all of the systems set up already. It's a bit of a pain to switch everything over. It takes probably 3 or 4 quarters to engineer all of that stuff, but they should probably be aiming in that direction rather than trying to bodge together using their existing ones. But Microsoft has never really been that great at transitioning their platforms into something easier to use. Tim, tell us, what exactly is SearchGPT, and should we be fearful of it? Or...
Well, we'll come back to the fear in just a minute. So OpenAI have been teasing that they've been working on a search product for ages. And I think a lot in the marketing industry have been looking at this because as soon as ChatGPT came out, it became that some people were using it like a search engine. And there were questions about whether Google could survive. And we've seen Google rush to get its own generative AI product into search engines, which has been met with mixed success. The fear was always, okay, OpenAI is going to come out with something and it's going to completely blow Google out of the water. Sam Altman had talked about wanting to completely reimagine search and not just start with listing websites and all of this. So there was a lot of anticipation in the marketing industry waiting to see exactly what this thing would look like and how it would work. Well, finally, OpenAI has announced that it's being tested as what they're calling a temporary prototype, which doesn't exactly sound like the highest commitment, highest confidence description I've ever heard of a new product. They're going to test it with 10,000 users to collect data, and then the goal is to integrate the best parts, as they call it, into ChatGPT in the future. So what does it look like? If anybody who's watching on the old video will be able to see my screen. Essentially, it looks disappointingly familiar. even though we've not seen this tool before, you've got a search box. So you type in the searches, when can I see nudie branches in Half Bay this weekend? And then there's a answer, which is basically a combination of different sub searches. So it's working out where you are, where you could see nudie branches. It's then thinking about this weekend. It's nudie branches like a type of fish or some sort of sea creature, it appears like. So it's giving you information about you can see them on these days at these times based on the tide. So this is essentially one of Google's, in Google's recent update, they talked about these multi-step reasoning searches where there's different searches that are going on in the background and then being pieced together to provide a complete answer. And this is an example of one of those longer tail searches, which I think generative AI is very well suited to, that traditional search maybe isn't. Because in order for traditional search to be able to answer that particular question, someone would have had to produce a page of content on their website about where to see nudie branches at each location based on the times that weekend, which is very unlikely. So this is one of those searches where there's likely to be zero existing website content that's going to answer that question in a complete form. So therefore, generative AI seems well suited to it. Now, it shows images in the search results. There's another search here, music festivals in Boone, North Carolina in August. And then it pulls together some different responses. These are fairly familiar from what we've seen with ChatGPT, though. Someone very clever actually managed to spot that this answer actually included factual inaccuracies and that one of these festivals doesn't actually run at this time. In fact, I think it's the first festival listed. So we've clearly got some issues here. We've still got hallucination, which is a sort of a feature of an LLM rather than a bug. You can ask follow-up questions as well, which Google tested in SGE and dropped before releasing. I don't know about you guys, but I've never used a follow-up question in SGE. They just seem to be sort of somewhat pointless. And they also, OpenAI is very keen to emphasize that they're paying their publishers. They've got these publisher partnerships, so you can get publishers' content direct in the search results, like the Atlantic and the New Yorker and all of the Financial Times, all of these different publishers. So the publishers are very excited about this and happy to talk about how forward-thinking OpenAI is and how amazing this is all going to be for publishers. 2 days before these partnerships were announced, they were calling this thing the death of creativity and copyright, but now they're being paid. It's absolutely brilliant. Now, from a marketer's perspective, I don't see how this thing is going to be anywhere near good enough to disrupt Google, as many in the industry are sort of breathlessly commentating. Similar to what Jess said about Bing, I think this is like a UX tweak. We're basically getting most of this functionality in ChatGPT anyway when it searches the web. And I think if they'd have just published this functionality straight to ChatGPT, I'm not even sure that most people would even notice. So for me personally, I've been looking forward to this moment for ages. Since they said we're working on a search product and it's going to be completely different, I'm like, right, okay, great. This is going to be awesome. It's going to completely disrupt search. All businesses are going to be having to think in a different way about their marketing. What new ad products is it going to create? Wow, this is going to be so great. And seeing this, I'm like, this looks like a minor UX tweak and a bunch of stuff that we're already used to, and it's still making up stuff. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but I'm gutted by this. If I'm honest. I think this looks really boring, and I'm interested to see what you thought, because I thought this was going to be way different, way like new blank canvas. Let's reimagine this whole thing from the ground up. For me, it's just not that. What are you thinking, Dal?
I'm kind of thinking that OpenAI started to get to that point where is it becoming almost empty promises? Like, we're going to do this thing, and then it comes out as like, well, we had that before. Like, it's not new. Like, you release voice agents or whatever. I don't know what you want to call them, but we're doing this voice thing now. Oh, that was there like 6 months ago. Oh, we're doing search. Oh, it's actually really not that different. Like, I don't know. It feels like they're saying a lot and not really delivering as much as promised. And maybe they've reached a peak. I don't want to speak too soon, because they could literally come out tomorrow and say, we've literally developed AGI and we're here. This is the next transition point. But maybe they've reached a ceiling of the potential of GPT 4.0 or 4.0 or whatever it's called, and now they're just trying to get the very best out of it and still be part of the conversation, especially as they're getting attacked from all sides by competitors. Like, Google is coming for them. They have had some decent opportunities come up with Apple Intelligence and things like that, but I don't know. I'm also not amazed. It looks okay. From a UX perspective, it's decent, but I'm not like scared about it.
Would you see yourself defaulting to this as they've shown it rather than Google? And if so, what types of searches would you be using it for?
Oh, that's a great question. I have to say, like yesterday, I spent most of my time searching using GPT 4.0, I guess it is, rather than Google. Like, there were a bunch of subjects I needed to dig deep into yesterday, and I spent the entire time just using a chat to answer all those questions about statistician versus tactician and revenue increasing versus revenue driven and all different things like that. And I'm never going to go to Google for that, because even if they do have that Gen AI element of it, it's not in the same depth as the conversation that I want as ChatGPT will give me and provide me. Like, if Google was designed more like a chat, I'd probably navigate there. Because AI overviews, as much as it is an improvement, in my opinion, compared to traditional search, it's still not the development of an idea that I need compared to like ChatGPT, or again, Perplexity is decent if you want to dig deep into a story. One thing I do actually like about Perplexity is if I Google something in there, sometimes I'll do like 3-panel windows on my computer and I'll be like, I want to see what Gemini says, I want to see what ChatGPT says, I want to see what Perplexity says. What I do think I actually quite like about the Perplexity part is the additional questions at the end. They seem closer to the original concept of the question I've asked compared to on Google, where it's like the question is often a bit vague. So I don't know. At the moment, I'm still navigating a lot towards a chat for a concept discussion. But if I'm looking for like a maze near me to take my daughter with, apparently she loves mazes after my holiday, I'm going to go to Google every single time because it's got reliable locational information and stuff like that, which none of the other new tools have yet to replicate well. What about yourself, Jess? Do you see yourself using SearchGPT instead of ChatGPT, or SearchGPT instead of Google Search or Bing or any of those?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a scrub who doesn't pay for premium ChatGPT, so this is actually new to me because I don't have that search and that connection to the internet. When I use it, is one of the reasons why I stopped using it and I started using Claude more. The reason I don't use Perplexity despite that is because I would ask Perplexity an answer that I felt like it should be able to know, and then it would, like, I asked Perplexity a question about Perplexity, and then it had to pull information from a bunch of sources that weren't even its official sources to answer me, and I was like, that just feels a bit strange. So I think because of that, there are a lot of things that like appeal to me. I can definitely understand Tim's feelings of like, we wanted something groundbreaking, but I suppose there's only so many ways to do search, and if you want the wider population to adopt this, then they're going to want something that they feel like they know already. I do think there's a lot of things that's appealing about it, especially for like that like top of funnel, when people have a problem but they just don't know how to articulate it, and then they might ask a question. Like, sometimes I'll type something into Google and I'll just be like, this nearly there, but it's not quite what I was after. And then I can kind of tailor it and be like, oh, okay, that's kind of it, but could you find me something that looks a bit more like this? Like, and then they might be able to do it. Like, it's really hard to kind of articulate that without being able to pull an example out of thin air, right? But like, yeah, I don't have that many feelings about it any which way. I guess I'm a bit kind of like, okay, ChatGPT, do whatever, I don't care. Because there's that many different things going on. And also, I guess what I want to say to people is you don't necessarily have to drastically change the way that you're doing your SEO or your content strategy to connect with this. I'm sure there will be like a lot of content coming out soon that's like how to get number one in ChatGPT search. And I think it's important to pay attention to that. But I think the fundamentals are always going to be the same, which is just put out good content that comes from a place of, that expertise, experience.
Authoritativeness and trust.
Thank you. I was like other letters in that acronym. But yeah, I think if you're just creating good content, then surely ChatGPT, SearchGPT will be taking from that. I think as well, the name just isn't great. Oh, I'm gonna GPT that. No, you're not. Like, I don't know.
Well, Dale said when I Google something on Perplexity, like that gives
really?
me, yeah,
Wow.
and that doesn't that just perfectly identify the switching problem. I do agree that, like, for longer tail searches, an LLM is far superior. And if you want to brainstorm, or if you want some specific answer to a question that you don't know how to word properly, you're never going to be able to type in a 20-word prompt into Google and get a good answer. It's just not how it works. But with ChatGPT, actually, the longer your question, the more detailed and the more perfect your answer. Whereas with Google, it's kind of the opposite. So I can definitely see the use case. I feel like what ChatGPT is trying to do, though, is do the web search piece as well, but without a business model to support it, i.e. advertisers, and competing against someone who has as close to nailed web search as we could get.
I can't help but think that maybe this is part of a phased approach to something they're trying to achieve, and that perhaps this product launch, if you want to call it that, isn't necessarily for the end user. This is them positioning themselves to say to Apple, hey, you know that 5 billion or 10 billion is you send to Google for your search part? Well, since we have this partnership already, we're developing this search product. You could give that money to us instead, and we don't have advertising, so we're already fitting in with your like concerns about advertising that Apple has. Like, maybe it's a bit of a play for that. I don't know.
But it's the other way around, right? Google pays Apple $20 billion a year to let Apple users use Google. No. So if ChatGPT wants to become the default search, I mean, that's $20 billion of basically free revenue that Apple would get for just typing a different URL into its default search. I can't see how they can win this.
We're going to press on to the next part of the Dojo podcast, which is where we turn these stories into marketing tasks that you can do to hit your revenue goals for this year. Now, which story do we think is the tippity top and should be turned into tasks? Tricky one, because they're very relevant to each other. Any gut feelings on this one? No. Okay, in that case,
it's tough. It's really tough. Like, I've both of them have elements that I think are really important. Like, I think really my story is a bit about not trying to be everything to everyone. Like, it feels like Bing's trying to make everyone happy. So they're ramming their website full of stuff. Whereas actually, if you cut things down and just focus on one audience, like if they just wanted to do the AI and that's their thing, cool, go ahead. If they want to support their publishers, cool, go ahead. So I do wonder if there's a conversation to be had there, but then maybe we talk about both today. I feel like we have time to talk about both stories, Dale.
I'm not sure there's any actions in the Search GPT, though, is there?
Not that we haven't maybe covered many times before, but just for a refresh, just, understand how your target market thinks and feels. Make sure you write the best kind of content you possibly can. Think about the different queries that they are going to enter into any kind of search platform, whether it's a chat generative version or not, and just make sure that you're doing it really well with all the kind of typical SEO stuff. Like, build up that profile for your brand, for yourself, through links, through mentions, all that kind of stuff. That stuff still applies regardless of the platform, as far as I'm concerned. So unless there's any disagreements with that, we're going to go for the Bing story. Perfect. Magical. Tim Cameron Kitchen, what marketing tasks can business owners do based on this story?
I wonder if the main takeaway from not just this episode of the Bing saga, but Bing's struggles against Google over the years has been, if you're going to take on an established incumbent who's bigger and has more market share and better funding and is superior to you, you have to be able to concisely describe why you're better. We see this all the time with challenger clients. We can have a client who is taking on an established huge brand, and we can chip away at that huge brand if they have a proposition which is clear to them and clear for us to communicate with the audience. If, however, they're just a slightly inferior version of the main brand and they want to compete just because they want to compete, that's really difficult. Their marketing costs will be high, their CPA will be high, because there's actually no reason for people to switch out. So for me, this is a bit of self-reflection and making sure that you've got a really compelling offer to go to the market with to justify them making that switch. Otherwise, everything's just a little bit more difficult.
100%. Jess, any marketing tasks you would recommend the marketing managers and directors might want to do after your winning story?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties in a lot with what Tim said, but it really is looking at what your competitors are doing and then thinking about what makes you stand out against them. And this could be as small as just your family owned. I remember we spoke to a business who, they one of the things that people really loved about them was the personal experience they got. After they submitted their order, they would get a phone call being like, hey, we just want to make sure that you're definitely getting what you want from this. And, just to check that the thing, it was like, I think it was custom PCs. And they really liked that they would call them and be like, hey, I know this is the thing that's available right now, but I just want to check what you want this for. And could this potentially be, maybe we could swap out these parts. And, they just kind of made it this really personal experience. Which is how they could compete with bigger players. And I mean, we're working on some content right now, a video about challenger insurance companies, and their main thing is just like, we're so much easier and we're so much clearer and we just tell you what is what, and there's all these ways that you can compete by not doing exactly the same thing as what the bigger people are doing. So if you are under pressure to kind of go against a different brand and you're like, well, this worked for them, maybe look at different industries. YouTube and Google are full of resources about challenger brands, and we're putting out some of our own soon as well. So if you're particularly an exposure ninja person, then we've got some content coming out about those. But really have a look at what they're doing, even if they're not in your industry, and think, oh, actually, this insurance brand is really just clean and so different to this one. Or we actually did a video about banking not too long ago that was about like how, I think it took you like 10 clicks to find out that you couldn't make a bank account with HSBC, whereas you could set up a Monzo account, a business account with Monzo in like 2 clicks. So it's just, I think figuring out what your competitors are doing, figuring out how you stand out, and then really running with that. And I mean, in every way, if you're going to say you're the easiest system to work with, your website needs to be easy. It needs to be easy to understand. Your demo process needs to be easy. Your platform needs to actually be easy. You can't just say, we're the easiest, we're easier than this other brand. So yeah, find out your unique thing and then run with it. Really push it.
Excellent. I'm going to add a final multi-step task for everybody listening and watching us on YouTube. The first thing you're going to do is go to exposureninja.com/podcast and find 300 plus podcasts that will help you through every part of your marketing, through strategy, figuring out how to convert people with some killer CTAs, you name it, it's covered there. The second part of that is that you're going to forward one of your favorite episodes to somebody that you love in the world of marketing or within your business as well. Share the Exposure Ninja love. And the final step of this multi-step process is to go to exposureninja.com/review and request a free website and marketing review for your business. And we'll try and highlight the best opportunities for you to increase your opportunity to convert the highest quality leads and turn them into new and recurring revenue. Thanks everyone for another great episode, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.